William Fong, do you hear us in room 2?
Yes, I got you loud and clear. Hopefully you can see my slides and hear me as well. Turn my video on, so it's like I'm there.
I still don't hear your microphone yet.
Okay, I'm talking right now. Can anyone else hear me? Maybe you're muted on your end or your speakers are quiet. Okay, sounds like it's something with the room then. Yep, I'm talking right now. Will Fong here, having a good time out in Hawaii.
So far I cannot hear you, but you can hear me. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, so you can hear me, I can't hear you yet. So.
Get 2 thumbs up. Get some peace signs too. Happy Loon. Oh, look at this. Wow. They have the feature so I can put emojis on my thing. Wow. I'm still talking. Anyone else tried this? It's kind of like FaceTime. It'll do the thumbs up too. Oh yeah. Wow. How did they do that?
So I can see you, I can see your presentation, but I still can't hear you, and you can hear me. We're going to see if we can give you access for your microphone.
Yep. So still talking, moving my laser
I
pointer
can hear you
around.
now, perfect.
Busy.
Give me
Okay, great.
1 second here.
Okay. And I have some slide sound on one of my slides too, so hopefully it's not overwhelming. It's going to have some epic music perhaps. Hope everything is all good in sunny San Diego. The weather looks beautiful out there.
1 second.
Oh yeah. Do these cool emojis while we wait. I don't know if anyone else has tried this on video, but you can.
Okay, we can hear you and we can see
emote
you,
now.
and I'm going to hand the microphone over to the moderator.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome everyone back. We're going to get started again here. So I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Will Fong. He's part of our NIWC Pacific team out in Hawaii in Code H, but very tied in with Compact Fleet, very tied in with INDOPACOM. Will has been among many titles, he's the lead researcher for our 5G experimentation. They're on the island of Hawaii, but also Whidbey Island, where we've done a lot of 5G testing and experimentation, still ongoing. But of all of our 5G researchers, they're closest to the edge and closest to the warfighter, I think. So looking forward to hearing Will talk about how they are using 5G, FutureG in that theater of operation. So Will, I will turn it over to you.
Yep. Thank you for the excessively kind introduction, Andy, and hope you got some nice pictures there of me, Brian. I really appreciate everyone accommodating the virtual presentation and distributed architecture that we're currently playing out right now, as it's quite busy, as you might imagine, out here on the front lines. So yes, to Andy's point, been doing 5G out here for almost 5 years now, ever since NDA 2019. So excited to share with you some of the latest efforts that we have going on and where we're looking towards next. So hopefully everyone sees my slides and you'll be able to see this next thing here. So this is kind of a cool video that I like to show at the beginning every presentation to show where are we looking towards and what technologies are we currently looking to implement within the fleet. This one's called Sea Strike. So See it.
164, crosswind.
Admiral, contact of interest in the Northern Strait.
Four and 5 launching decoys.
Weapons free.
Message Fleet Headquarters. U.S. civilians are safe. Well done. Now back to work. Other battles are coming.
Ooh, I get chicken skin or goosebumps every time I see that. That is some high quality production value. I know you've been listening a lot and sitting around for a lot of these exciting presentations, but I'd love to just get some interaction here. So, we saw a lot of technologies just now in the video. Does anyone want to just online or otherwise just throw out some of the technologies that you saw that we're implementing now out in the Navy or otherwise there? I don't know how good the room comms are, but maybe the folks online can throw out some cool technologies. Yep. Lots of fast connectivity, mesh comms with latency sensitive and high bandwidth applications. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone on the line that responded. I'm sure everyone else in the room has their own ideas, but we have these grand ideas for all of these applications that we're going to want to implement across the fleet and most importantly across the joint forces right out here in the Indo-Pacific. So one of the things that you need to know is that we're going to be working with a lot of the different services and not just services within the US, but a lot of our allies and partners out here. They're going to be crucial to the activities that we have. So for those of you that have attended the Don IT East presentation, hopefully this slide hasn't become too boring to you, but I really love it because it encapsulates a lot of the distributed architectures that we're looking towards implementing and that we're currently doing right now with our presentation here today. So hopefully everyone in the room is familiar with agile combat employment, your distributed maritime operations, your expeditionary advanced space operations, and your combined joint all domain command and control. Hopefully everyone is familiar with these concepts, but if you're not, at the very simple level, it's how do we leverage our forces across a very dispersed area of responsibility and still be able to project our presence and maintain a rules-based order while we're out here in the Indo-Pacific. Now, a question, I don't know if this is going to be redundant or not, but I would love to hear, what is it going to take to execute any of these concepts out here, right? And hopefully by my introduction and what we've been doing out here with 5G, that it's not super obvious what the answer is. I don't know if people want to throw things out there or otherwise use your imagination. I know there's a lot, but I'm going to focus on some things out here. Yes, and it sounds like a lot of people are throwing things out there in the room, so I'll just move on and spoil it for everyone, but it's going to be that data fabric. So how are we connecting all of our forces, all the way from the sensor down to the shooter, up all of the echelons and all of your combined operating pictures? How are we going to do that? And most importantly, for the focus of my research is how are you going to do that using cellular? So once again, another slide, but I'm going to give benefit of the doubt for people that have not attended my first presentation. But these are the various ways that we're looking towards enabling connectivity and enabling the data fabric, which here I'm defining as your users all the way at the edge and the data and applications that they need to reach out to. So notice I'm not saying any particular locations or anywhere because, we've always had this mantra out in the Indo-Pacific area of responsibility of places, not bases. So how are we enabling our data, which could be anywhere across the large Indo-Pacific AOR? And if you're not familiar with the AOR, then I have a slide right at the end that kind of shows the geography, but you're seeing a lot of the world's GDP, you're seeing a lot of the world's population, all within that area of responsibility, which we are all working very hard to deter and maintain the peace there. So looking forward to seeing how these technologies can enable that. So some of the ways that we've been doing cellular networking or networking in general in the theater and island hopping scenarios is just bringing in your own network, right? So you're seeing a relationship here, and I'm forgetting that you cannot see my hand, so I'm going to use the screen now. But you're seeing this relatively simplistic and maybe intuitive relationship between the security posture that we have in our operations and our operational burden here. So you're seeing as we're bringing in our own networks, our operational burden is going to be higher. So I've heard since I started this program that sometimes it takes 2 weeks before we do any exercises to prepare and just lay the ground for all of the forward operating bases and everything to get that private network set up. But of course, since we have that private network, we're also able to control all of the configurations. And theoretically, we're seeing that, this maintains a high level of security posture, right? So because I hear the 2 weeks, I'm saying, with how quickly things can evolve here in the theater, it's really going to be important for us to bring that down. So, as a part of that, one of our efforts is the 5G Pony, or the Portable Operations Network Integrator. Essentially, it's 5G transit case based systems, or a 5G cell tower with a core in transit case-based cases. Our idea here was that we wanted to design an expeditionary capability that you could throw in the back of a helicopter or something else, something where you didn't need to have like a whole C-130 or C-17 shifting everything around the AOR, right? So this is where you're coming in with that. And then another thing that we're seeing come out is this idea of RAN sharing. So you might be familiar with RAN sharing if you're a Cricket Wireless or a Mint Mobile subscriber. So this is a concept called a mobile virtual network operator, as opposed to a mobile network operator, which is your typical big three: AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. Instead of that, you're leveraging the excess bandwidth and capacity that these network operators have to continue to service the population, of course, typically for a reduced price there. So you have this idea, but another idea that we're looking at playing with is this idea of a heavy mobile virtual network operator, which instead of just owning the billing and sales and marketing, you're also owning the core or the brains of the network and the subscriber identity module, or SIMs, as you might know them, and the overall persona of the user that's going to be on the network, all the way short of the cell tower. So you're really leveraging a lot of the capital expenditure that's going on in the theater already, wherever you might be deploying. And then, of course, something that we're all familiar with, procuring a SIM and a hotspot in theater. You head to the airport, you get down to an airport kiosk, and you say, hey, I want to get connected for so many days, right? And of course, there you're left at the whims of the existing network, where you're leveraging the security configurations that they may or may not be implementing there. So of course, you're at the lower end of the spectrum. But here, I think the trade space we're really looking for is in the center area, between where we're closing the gap between bringing our own networks and where we can leverage the existing infrastructure as much as possible. I think these are kind of the ways, at least for cellular, how we can get connected readily in the area of responsibility. So I want this to be an interactive conversation there. I see there have been some chat questions already, so I'll pause here. I mean, literally, I only have 10 slides, so I'm really looking forward to doing any type of Q&A here. So if anyone has any questions in the room or on the chat, I'm kind of monitoring chat on my phone right now, but it's kind of difficult for me to see. So if there are any relevant questions to the slide, please highlight that to me now.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Why are you still using Sims? Why not using eSIMs?
Right. So, of course, we're leveraging eSIMs. So sorry, it's not clear in the slide here, but yes, we're using SIMs and eSIMs out there. Great question, by the way. eSIMs are very easy to provision. Some of them you can just scan a QR code and you're up on the network. So very cool. Or you even have services where you can get the eSIM before you get into the country and enable the service there. So something that's very critical for onboarding, especially as a lot of the services are looking at bring your own device scenarios. So yes, very much looking at SIMs there. Great question. And thank you for helping me clarify this slide, which I should have updated. Any other questions? Ooh,
Hey, Will.
Kurt Jacobs here to, ask me a hard question. Go ahead.
Was it the lack of hair that tipped it off? Good to
No,
see you, Will.
no. You just have a very good aura. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So, wow, you made me forget the question. I guess a couple quick ones is that what about backhaul, right? It's like seems to be focused more on how we terrestrially connect locally, but and operating in a DDL type environment. How do you work this into this picture? Maybe you're going to cover this next. And then is it also bring your own network or also have a network sitting there at the ready for places, not bases?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a mixture of both. And I have an OV that talks to your latter part of the question, which is, where possible, we want to use the commercial networks that are available. However, that's not going to be the case every single place that you go. So to your latter part of the question, yes, it's both. To your former part of the question about backhaul, so yes, this is just talking about the cellular front haul down to the user level. But the idea is that, you have the front haul portion, but you'll have the back haul, which you're already putting into place. So to name a few, you hopefully have heard some folks from the PMW lanes talking about the various ways they're bringing in SATCOM constellations. You also have a lot of different technologies other than terrestrial fiber. I mean, of course, we're going to use the terrestrial fiber that's available. And, particularly when we're leveraging the commercial networks here, you're going to see a lot of use of the terrestrial fiber or undersea or submarine fiber, which is out there. So really, it's, when we're bringing in our own networks, we're going to diversify the backhaul there. I think we also have some projects out there, which is, how do we enable this as a product for, and of course you're looking in from an industry perspective, but how does this become a product for industry to now offer to customers like, hey, if you have these towers that you're really interested in around certain DoD locations, how do we offer that as a product saying, hey, we know that all of our towers have terrestrial fiber. Now, if you want to have this cool SATCOM package or integrate these other various cool backhaul methodologies like microwave point-to-point or optical links or free space optics, I said two different things there. How do we enable that as a product such that, if we want increased resilience, even in our terrestrial commercially offered networks, then how does that then become a product there? So I think there's a whole conversation to that, and we can definitely dive into that further, but I'm going to keep that as my answer for now as I get into maybe the private implementation guide, which you should have seen out of DoD CIO, and maybe the OV1, which will hopefully answer any other questions. So any other questions in the room on just this slide or otherwise? All right, I saw a thumbs up, so I guess I did a really good job. Any other questions online that are cool or other? guys. Ooh, I cannot even access the chat here. Yep, thank you, Mr. McDonald, for throwing that in the chat. That is a distro 8 implementation guide, which I will just kind of go through this strategy and how we've been following and maybe even informing some of this. But I know this is probably the most potato quality slide that I could have grabbed from there. However, this was online, and thus I had to use it for my distro 8 capabilities, and because this was a very fun ad after I did a dry run of this. So basically you're seeing, and I'll just focus on the lines of effort here, but you're seeing where do we leverage commercial 5G at the DoD installations, right? Commercial industry has done a really good job in the very well populated areas, CONUS and OCONUS. So how do we fast follow and leverage that? And I think I saw Ms. Thompson in the room running the Spiral 4 contract. So hope I did not scare her away there. But you know, Spiral 4 is going to be a really great way to leverage the commercial 5G at DoD installations. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but within the scope, now there's this way to get that fixed wireless access capability off of the towers into the buildings for that critical in-building connectivity, which we've seen time and time again from the various customers over the 5 years that we've been looking into cellular for the warfighter there. Then you're seeing line of effort 2. I'll just say what everything lines up to afterwards, but line of effort 2 are the various unique 5G features and systems which we'll be implementing through our various industry partnerships, through 3GPP standards or third generation partnership program, basically your cellular international interoperability standards there, innovative solutions out of industry and DoD, as well as DoD policy and guidance, where we're going to be labeling, you know, if we want to have some specialized configurations or otherwise, how can we implement that as line of effort 2? And then, of course, some of what we mentioned here, you're not going to have a lot of commercial infrastructure in some of the places that we're looking to deploy. So how do we bring that 5G all the way out to the warfighter and having these various outcomes that enables them to complete their complex and multifaceted mission out in the theater? So I think you're going to see hopefully a lot of overlap with what I just presented and these lines of efforts. So I think with your commercial 5G at DoD installations or otherwise in theater, you're going to see that this is our use of in-theater SIMs and eSIMs. Thank you for the question there. SIMs and eSIMs or MiFi pucks there, as well as our usage through mobile virtual network operators. Number 2 kind of lines up with the maybe bespoke private networks that we've since built out up at Whidbey Island and Lulu'ule out in Oahu, as well as the various tranche site efforts that we've seen. So that's kind of overlapping there with not only the mobile virtual networks, but maybe starting to talk into the expeditionary and tactical 5G. And then, of course, there with our expeditionary and tactical 5G, you're seeing a lot of our efforts as we're pushing out into the theater there. I'll hold any question. I'll hold for any questions here or my interpretation of the DoD 5G private implementation strategy out of DoD CIO. So I'm not just making up all of these things. We're actually trying to follow a strategy which is aligning to the requirements that we're hearing out of INDOPACOM. Fun fact, the reason why I was rushing into this today was because, you know, we're supporting Mr. Stevenson directly, who has now become the INDOPACOM J8. So just had a great meeting with him right before there. So any questions on this slide?
Sorry, another question. It was
Yes,
from the
please
previous
go ahead.
slide. It was from the previous slide and this slide. And I'm not sure if you have it in the future slides, but spectrum. You said bring your own network. Can you touch how are you going to manage spectrum allocations, or is that for another day?
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So that's a very important question that we're looking at with the dynamic spectrum sharing projects that are going on. But I think what we've found to really accelerate uh, our research efforts is by leveraging a lot of the commercial spectrum that's out there. So obviously, DoD spectrum is a year, if not multi-year process to acquire, and it's really a zero chance for us as a research and development program to be able to acquire that, right? So leveraging a lot of the commercial spectrum that's available to us and partnering with the folks that are owning the spectrum in the locations that are out there is going to be really important. And, you know, to your question specifically about expeditionary and tactical solutions, sometimes we were able to get spectrum through our partnerships with the mobile network operators or spectrum folks that are uh, owning the parts of the spectrum that we're interested in out in the theater. So through those partnerships, we're able to leverage spectrum. Through experimental licenses, we're able to leverage spectrum, or maybe even in unlicensed spectrum bands. That's where we're able to conduct our feasibility experiments and see, hey, you know, will this even help your mission? Does this even help you complete your mission faster, more effectively, otherwise? I hope that answers your question there. That, you know, essentially there are a variety of ways that we are looking to introduce spectrum or leverage the spectrum that's out there and be able to radiate uh, for our efforts. Great question, by the way. Any other questions? All right, so I'm not hearing anything, so I'm just gonna go on to our operational view one, right? So this is kind of gonna be the meat of the presentation, but of course we can go into more efforts here, but of course we're here to talk about, you know, what are we doing west of the IDL, out in Guam, out in Tinian, and other locations that we're interested in, right? So, you know, you have Admiral Paparo and Admiral Aquilino before him talking about let's experiment and exercise west of the international date line. And of course, Guam is that place west of the IDL. We are interested in looking at many other locations west of the IDL. So, you know, I mentioned before we have our distributed concepts here, that are going all the way from the national level strategy and policy down to the last mile actual operators that are out here executing these various concepts. I guess the last one I didn't have at the beginning was, you know, the U.S. Army forward operating base. Hopefully, I'm not insulting any Army people in the room today, but you are included as a part of this slide, and this is going to be a very joint effort, considering the various locations we need to work out of and how this is going to be everyone's teamwork to maintain peace out here. And you'll see where we're integrating a lot of the various technologies that we mentioned before about the host nation SIMs and eSIMs, our RAN sharing with the host nation networks, as well as bringing your own network, and a little nod to the various pace that we're going to be using as a part of our backhaul strategy to tie all of those concepts together. Here, what we're really trying to do is, you know, we had that great publication out of NIST, special publication 800-207 on zero trust architecture. So really operating from that mode where it's not going to be possible to trust every single network that we're out there, right? You know, we want to provide a commercial layer transport wherever folks go, because we've found, especially over telework, and since it's top of mind with the various executive orders that have been out there for return to work, you know, we've been doing distributed operations and everything through our telework. We've still been able to operate and conduct our missions in a distributed fashion over, our tactical locations, either at our home or in the coffee shop or otherwise, using unaccredited Wi-Fi and being able to access all of our O365 applications, right? So how are we still going to be able to operate in that mindset through the theater using any comms that are available to us, right? So we're pushing a lot of security onto the applications and the devices that we're using such that they're able to operate regardless of who is on the network or what kind of OEMs are out there providing the various RAN components or otherwise, whether or not they're favorable or not favorable. I see a future where we don't care about that, right? Where we just want to use anything opportunistically and we're still able to get our mission done, right? Hopefully that's not too crazy of a concept, but that's what I'm here for, is to start discussions, right? So typically I get a lot of questions around that, so I'll pause in case anyone wants to interrupt me on this slide. Otherwise, the rest of the slide can be pretty self-explanatory. Yep, and I know that everyone is very, very aware of the recent attacks with the various typhoons that are out there, showing how fragile our mobile network operators can be to such nation state level attacks. So, exploring what are they actually getting and do we care about that is very important. So, yes. All right. And I see people getting up, so go ahead, Mr. Jacobs, once again.
Well, first of all, the audiovisual equipment you have on your end is better than we have on our end, because you can see things. So maybe you got your IT budget's too big out there. On this slide and the previous slide, what has been the consideration? Because there's a lot of strong language in the National Defense Authorization Act and national policy about 5G secure supply chain, the use of ORAN, commercial off-the-shelf technology, and then if we're relying on these other nations, are we, is this aligned, and how is that being balanced?
Yeah, so you're asking about the way that we're trying, like, there are a lot of efforts pushing Open RAN and open radio access networks. So basically using open interfaces to have no longer proprietary stacks that are supporting your radios and cell towers and otherwise, right? And how does this align with the various efforts that we're doing? So I think it's kind of a two-pronged approach, right? So we're looking at how are we increasing our security and decreasing our risk, right? The risk is never zero out there. So our goal is to reach that optimal point about, where are we willing to accept the risk for the certain operation that we're doing? Not everything needs to be in a skiff. And I would hope that it's not in a skiff, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't even be able to work with half of the industry that's doing all of the great work that's out there, right? So, we understand that there's a balance between what really needs to be protected and what can we get away with out there. So we are cognizant of that fact, but it's kind of two pronged, right? If we're understanding what's out there in the interfaces or otherwise, then it's easier to trust there. And I think it's also opening your aperture for efficiencies that we might not have thought of, because previously radio access networks have been proprietary stacks. So maybe there's an opportunity there as we're looking, and there's some discussion going on in the chat with our cyber defense teams. If we're able to have insight into the open source nature of things, then it's going to be easier for us to manage what kind of threats are out there. So I think it's kind of in a lot of people's good interest. Not only are you opening the market share for a lot of the various providers out there, but I think you're going to see a lot of efficiencies and improvements to technology that you wouldn't have seen otherwise if you were just continuing along with tried and true stacks that are proprietary and no one's able to touch, right? So I don't know if that was a good answer to your question, but I think there's great promise in not only the security benefits to the architecture, but also the way that we're able to trust, increase the trust, even though we're operating in zero trust. I know these seem like conflicting views here, but how are we going to leverage the best of what's out there and integrate that into our ecosystem such that we can give our warfighters the best that there is to offer, such that they can complete their missions most effectively and come home safely. Sorry if that was kind of all over the place, but we're putting together a lot of very complex issues into an open source group here.
Yeah,
So.
I understand that, and and you also need a level of adaptability too for that little bit of military. As much as we say commercial off the shelf, military does have unique requirements. So, okay, thank you.
Yep. Very, very good points, and I see where your questions are going, and I think, there are going to be some follow-ups perhaps for you. So, okay, any other questions? All right. So I'm just going to continue. Folks on the line, feel free to. Oh, actually, no chat features are available, so maybe we'll take a look quickly at the chat here. I don't know, Andy, if you've seen anything go through the chat that's of particular interest. All right. So, Mr. McDonald, I see you have a question for me. Are we, the Navy, doing enough experimenting with signaling and modulation techniques in the 5G FutureG towards LPI, LPD, LPX, and unique requirements? The short answer is I think there's a sufficient amount currently going on for the scopes that we have been pushing out there. I think there could always be more though. And I think that, as we are looking to, and of course we have to be very careful as we talk anything related to that, but I guess my short answer is going to be yes, but there could always be more. So, and we can tag up after this too. And I see some comments about, smart devices, managing signals. So it's really going to come down to the user, like where are we needing these smart devices? How are they being employed? We already have these great OPSEC requirements when it comes to secure spaces or otherwise. Do we foresee, like, the big change I see is, do we foresee a space where those are going to need to intermingle? And, if so, then that's where we're going to have to take a hard look at policy and see, are we okay with these devices being included in some of your more secure spaces, right? So I think there's a lot of work going into that, but really it comes down to how are we specifically pushing out our use cases with the various devices that we're going to be implementing. Okay. So yeah, lots of good stuff going on in the chat too. I don't know if there was other questions in the room. And I think to Kurt's comments about the IT equipment that we have, yes, they're very good. And we want to be able to give our operational warfighter at least this level of insight from wherever they're working from from whatever operation center. So I think if I can do this on a Nautilus endpoint, just a big shout out to Damon and team for these. If I can do this with some Nautilus devices and my phone, then let's see what else we can do with the even greater equipment we're getting out to the warfighter. So, all right. So I can just finish up this slide really quickly, but out in Guam, west of the IDL, we're seeing a well-populated location with robust commercial comms. So you have about 300,000 people. You got some urban areas. You have a lot of military out there. So you got a lot of robust commercial comms that you're able to leverage as a part of that. And there, we're even able to, to the point about cybersecurity, we're able to see, what is our adversary going to see and what do we care about them seeing, right? So, still at the other end is a human, I think, doing all of the parsing of the various data and all of that, right? So, what do we care about them seeing? I think is a really great question that we're actively looking into, right? And then out in Tinian, Northern Marianas Islands, and actually out in Peleliu as well, where you might have heard that there's the Marine Corps. They've rehabilitated the field there, right? You have sparse and developing commercial comms, so to be able to leverage those as tactical locations, what is it going to take, and what's the balance of the flyaway kits that we currently have versus this new technology where companies out there are looking to modernize their equipment. What's the balance that is going to enable our operators to be able to work effectively in those locations? And of course, our objective out here, we want to demonstrate that data fabric I mentioned before, which enables all of these distributed concepts you see with the FutureG tech. And of course, FutureG is just an enabling technology. So of course, you're going to see a lot of these other critical technologies be enabled west of the IDL. So how can we continue to experiment ourselves and support that experimentation and exercising west of the IDL with the various technologies you see here? I'll pause in case there are any other quick questions here. All right, I'm doing a super good job. So, yeah. Yep. And yes, Dave, you bring up a very good question about the various assessments. And please be assured that everything we're doing out here is getting assessed. And of course, the thing to note about this theater is that it's not just being assessed by us, but also perhaps even assessed by anyone that's out there. So yeah, we're very cognizant of that. All right, so I can move on to some of our previous work where we've already done a lot of this work up at Anderson Air Force Base. So, you're seeing a lot of areas out here with our combat comm squadron and the various Air Force units out here. So we've been able to provide coverage to locations where coverage is desired and is currently being targeted for increased modernization. So we're looking at the various storage areas that they have and supporting real life operations out there to this day. So, I think a lot of the services are seeing the relevance of this technology and are more willing, and you're seeing a lot of investments out here to increase this networking, because an increase in networking is essentially an increase in readiness there. So we're able to provide operations and training and basically get our warfighters up to snuff such that when we are providing this technology to them, it's simple enough for an 18-year-old to use them. I mean, a lot of folks these days are going to be very young. I was once young when I started at this project, and now I'm seeing I mean, kids to me at this point, and kids to everyone in this room who are joining the military. I am already 10 years older than them, right? So we need these kids to be able to understand these complex technologies and be able to operate it at a very high level. And, you know, giving them cellular technology, it's really putting into their hands technology that they're familiar with, that, you know, they don't have to learn overnight or you know, over a few months like they would with some of these radios that are out there that are much older than them, right? I'm just thinking of like some of the 40-year-old radios that are older than even me. So okay, so any questions on this or any of the previous work that we've already done and are currently doing out in Guam? So we're out there, we're training folks, and you know, we're I think getting a very important place in the minds of our commanders out there. All right. So we also have some work with Tinian, right? So you're hearing about how the Air Force is rehabilitating a very historically important airfield. In case you're not familiar, that's where the atomic bombs were flown to end World War II, right? So from this airfield, we are looking at rehabilitation once again. So this is going to be a very crucial location. And if you haven't been out to Tinian, it's a lot of jungle. It's a lot of jungle. You fly over there in a puddle jumper. I think has it's been my first time in a very long time since I've flown in such a plane. So very cool to do that. But you know, you get over there, you just see a lot of dense jungle, and you have to think, this is probably not the only place that's important that we're looking to operate out of. So, what are the various solutions that we can implement in such a dense jungle area as we're looking to operate out of various locations west of the international date line, right? And over the next 5 years, you're not only seeing the Air Force, you're seeing the Navy, you're seeing the Marine Corps, and probably even the Army out here. I hope I'm not going to get canceled because I keep leaving the Army off. I'm so sorry. But even I've had conversations with the Army. They're looking to do a lot more out in the theater because of their crucial mission set out there as well. I'll pause there in case you have any questions. But at the very first, I'll put a quick plug. There's this great Western Lodge on Tinian. If you ever get out there, I highly recommend eating there and getting their specials. Super good food. All right, I'm doing a really good job of briefing, I guess, because no one has any questions. So out in Palau and Peleliu, this is really cool locations too. So in the news, Peleliu Airfield rehabilitated by the Marines. So thank you, Marines. Oh yes, Dave, thank you. The Tinian Western Lodge, very awesome food. Highly recommend. But you know, Peleliu out in Palau, another important location. You know, it's rehabilitated, but you have these southwestern islands south of Palau, and you have other government agencies also investing in the area for network modernization. So the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, you might have heard of some awards back in 2023 for grants to, you know, modernize the network out in Palau. Uh, some of the networks out there, and honestly, this is a reality for a lot of networks, is that, you know, they're still running copper that's 35, 40 years old. Where was everyone in this room 35, 40 years ago? I wasn't even a concept in my father's mind. So, you know, that that's kind of telling you the need that's out there and the areas of opportunity for folks to invest out in the region. And I think honestly, networks are really enabling a lot of these distributed architectures, right? So as you see, like a lot of these cool technologies that are being pushed out there for modernization and implementation of the cool video that you just saw right at the beginning, that's very cool. And, you know, we can develop those technologies in parallel, but unless we have robust and resilient networking, it's going to be very hard for us to implement a lot of those technologies. I mean, yeah. But anyway, you know, you have the Palau National Cell Corporation, or sorry, that's incorrect. That's the Palau National Communications Corporation looking to adopt ORAN technology. So, Kurt Jacobs, to your question earlier about, you know, what are folks looking at when it comes to ORAN, it comes down ultimately in that decision, you know, what is the best technology that's out there and what is technology that I can look to trust. So I believe that was part of the calculus as folks are looking at the different options that are out there, right? So I'll pause there in case there are any questions. There's this great article by USTDA about this, by the way, so feel free to check that out. Might be good partnership locations there. And I'll pause because I do need to. Thank you. Has anyone thought of any other questions or otherwise? I feel like I'm doing way too good of a job here. Maybe.
Hey, Will.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's loud. Yeah. In the room, it's loud. So, hey, I thought I'd ask a question. So you talked about 3 different types of options, maybe 3 different architectures, if you will, right? You know, leveraging commercial, RAN sharing, and then completely private. Yeah. So maybe can you provide some examples, or maybe just talk to the status of accreditation of each of those types of solutions? You know, what are your thoughts on that? Where are you guys at? Thank you.
Yeah. So I think as we've learned very quickly, right, in the zero trust architecture methodology, you're thinking about, you know, can I even trust my networks, right? And you know, I think once you pursue an ATO on a network, not only is it the government stamp of trust on a network, but it also becomes, hey, look at me, this is a target, right? So I think it starts to become, where are the boundaries for your accreditation? And I think based on the amount of cyber defense that we have, and you know, the capabilities, and just, you know, just going through that bureaucratic process, it's kind of in everyone's best interest to see, you know, do I really need to accredit the transport that things are running, or do I just need to protect where my applications are and the data is being hosted, and still reach them over any type of transport? So I guess what I'm saying is, the short answer is we're completely marketing the transport as not within that accreditation boundary, because the idea with distributed networks is that you should be able to operate on anything that you're given. And with O365 and some of our accredited applications going the way that they're going, we are seeing that we don't care what our underlying network is. During the telework phase and remote work phase of the past 4 years, we've seen that, you know, nobody got an accreditation on their home network. So it's really, what are we defining to be our network that needs to be protected? And I really think it's, where are your entry points into the data and applications you need to access, and how are you protecting the devices that are able to access them from the user perspective? So I know that wasn't quite the answer you might have been looking for, but we've that's just been the best way we've seen moving forward, and we are currently proving out that yes, you can operate in that methodology. So.
Hey Bill, this is John Xu from Land. Space World.
Yep.
Old Space
Hi, John.
Yeah, we talk a lot on the phone. Just a quick question for your shared RAN. How that works? Can you give us a definition? Is that mean we bring our own core network and UE, but use the host nation RAN G node?
Right.
It's not clear to me. How do you do that?
Yeah, and
do you have a definition of a shared RAN?
Yeah, and there is, Okay, so I'm hearing there's not a lot of clarity on what shared RAN is, and there's like a whole RAN sharing playbook that OUSD RNE FutureG pushed out. So I'll get that over to you because I know you always talk to me and ask me questions, but there's a distro A version as well. So go ask your friends up at FutureG and they'll share it with you, because I likely don't have the most updated version since they're constantly updating it. But short answer to your question is yes, it's both. Yes, you can use the core network, right?
Core network means
That is available
from
G-Node B from the in-theater country, right? So you can use that as a light MVNO construct, but you can also bring in your own core in a heavy MVNO construct, such that you are owning the control plane and the signaling in a way that is theoretically more secure, right? So you have a few ways to attack this. So in 3GPP standard, you have home routed roaming, right? Where you can, it's kind of in between that. You have your own core, you have the in-network core and the working together. Or you have dedicated core roaming where your core is working directly with the cell towers after, of course, various agreements that have to occur between you as the desired operator and the MNO that you're looking to work with. So I know it's a little fuzzy there, and that's kind of on purpose because, you know, RAN sharing is meant to be this fluid thing. So you're not just, no, I don't have my core, or yes, I do have my core, but you can operate in both methodologies, and that's part of the space that we're exploring as a part of our research.
So that means we only can work with like a friendly country. We bring all the core, but they open their base station link to us. We can connect it to their base station and provide the servers. Is that your concept?
Yeah, so you can.
Okay.
You can, and depending on how much trust you have, either way, or you know, if we really are following zero trust, then that shouldn't matter. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks. And also thank you.
Thank you.
We receive your pony, so we'll power up and maybe need your help. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Hi, well, my name is Daryl Porter. I'm a tech writer in the Space Force Narrowband SATCOM program office down here at Naval. And I'm not familiar with your system, and I walked in a little late because I was at an internship meeting. But my question is, are you dependent on satellites for any reason, or are you operating like line of sight, beyond line of sight, through other apertures? Like, how does your system operate?
Yeah, so I think there are a few ways that you can. So short answer is yes, we want to use SATCOM where it's available, whether that's MILSAT or COMSAT. I think both are feasible ways to conduct backhaul. But you know, in the data fabric methodology, if you're having your applications and data stack on premises, then theoretically you wouldn't need the backhaul that is available. Or, you know, if backhaul does not become available, then you're still able to conduct some type of operation. So the short answer is it depends on the use case, right? So if you can have completely disconnected operations, for example, I'm thinking of when ships have to go into MCOM, right? Emissions control,
Yes.
right? Or you know, you have some units that they don't have to talk back. They can just conduct operations and decide on their own. Then you can conduct in that disconnected operations, and then you don't have to. But you know, ideally, I think a lot of the architectures that are being pushed out in the region, we want to have all these different joint networks, right? And they have to reach back to HQs or whatever operation center. And I think the short answer to the usage of SATCOM is that SATCOM is going to play a large role along with other technologies to support the reach back that the users at the front lines are going to need to have with upper echelons, HQ, or HQ to the users down there. So I hope that answered your question. So yes, short answer, we'll use SATCOM where it's available. We don't need it all the time, but we will use it if it's available, and we have used a lot of commercial SATCOM in the past previously, and in some cases the various Sting increments, if you're familiar with that system or have seen that. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does, because we primarily
Yeah.
focus on MUOS right now, but it's a 3G satellite system, and this meeting's 5G, so that was the biggest reason why I came here. So we're kind of looking at how we can adapt after the year 2040 and forward. So thank you.
No, thank you. That was a great question.
Hey, Will, Paul Battaglia. Nice to meet you. Two
Hi,
questions.
Paul.
Two questions for you. Back to your slide on Tinian. You've got multiple constituents on the island. You've got the Navy, Marine Corps, and as well as the Air Force. Does that imply it's going to be a multi-network situation there, or is it going to be a single network? And second question for you is, do you have a strategy in place now to federate your packet cores?
Okay. Sorry, just writing down your questions so I can answer them effectively. So I guess my question would be back to you is, how are you defining the networks? Are you thinking like these are the mission networks that each of them are using, or some stack of applications, or are you just talking about like layer 1 through like the lower levels of the network where it's just transport level?
In terms of the number of networks being deployed?
Yes.
Is that what you're getting back to?
Yep.
No, I mean, they're going to be multiple core networks, I guess, on the island.
Core networks as in like there's going to be an Air Force network, like
Correct.
AFNet, Navy network, NMCI. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
You put it better than I did, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, all right, you have AFNet, you have NMCI, and you have Mixin, right? You have these networks that you're looking to support such that they can do some of their work and administrative functions, right? So the way that I think this is going to go is that we're purely there to provide them transport. They have their methods to bring in their cores to work together or reach back to whatever input to AFNet, NMCI, or Mixin. So I kind of like this one way that John Page put it out of Scenic, which is, all right, you have the transport, and of course in his case he's thinking about like strictly layer 1 physical infrastructure and then everything else, right? So in a similar breakout, I'm going to say that, all right, we're going to provide the transport for everyone, and it's going to be a transport that everyone can use. So if you're defining a network as something that folks can get connected to any of these on, then it's going to be one network. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that AFNet, NMCI, and Mixin are suddenly going to work together, right? I think I leave that to the AOs of those, but for that, we're going to make sure that warfighters, if they want to get connected to that, they can, and they can use the 5G or whatever other networks are available. And they can do that. They can reach back to their NIPR, right, or otherwise through VPNs or any on-prem stacks that they might find. And if they want to have those connections or co-locate it somewhere or have those fiber connections directly between those application level stacks, then they can, and that's totally up to them. But for simplicity, we're going to provide them a single transport layer. I guess that kind of touches and segues into your next one about, is there a strategy to federate the packet cores between them? And once again, I think that's going to be up to the services. I'm not going to dictate to them how they should do that. I mean, in my personal opinion, and this is Will's opinion, not the Navy or researcher, research of the Navy's opinion, I would think it's in their best interest to be able to work effectively together and have all of their application stacks work together. I would think that includes any type of common operating pictures that they have, because at the end of the day, it is going to be a joint mission. All right.
Thanks very much.
Now, yeah. Of course, I'm glad I could help you out there. Right. Another question? Oh, I am on a roll.
Hey, Will. Hey, I'm
So,
back. I
yeah,
just
go
wanted to
ahead.
follow up on the
Fire away.
accreditation question to make sure I understand. So for
Yep.
for the option where you're looking at what you refer to as shared RAN, or let's imagine it's heavy MNO, just for the sake of discussion. So
Yeah,
we have heavy MNO, one option, and then another option would be completely private, right? Are you saying that those, and let's focus on the core. So are you saying that those cores don't need to be accredited? That's my question. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So short answer is yes. I don't think they need to be accredited, because I think we found this division between, and just like in the previous question, so this is actually a great segue, where we divided it between the transport. So the core is handling a lot of your control plane traffics to allow your devices to connect to the different networks, right? To the transport network, I should say. When it comes to like your operational networks like AFNet, NMCI, MXIN, whatever the Army uses. I'm so sorry, I'm so bad with the Army. I will work on that before my next presentation. You know, all of the ways that folks are getting to Nipper, I leave that to the devices, and that's where your accreditation boundary is. It's wherever you set whatever Nipper and the application stack to be, right? So I think gone are the days where you have like this Ethernet or this fiber is strictly for NMCI, right? But more, we don't care what the transport is. We're still going to hit Nipper with our approved devices. So I think you're going to see a smaller attack surface, uh, much easier time onboarding networks to get connectivity through the theater. And you know, you're really protecting what needs to be protected, which is your data and applications, which is separate to the core network. So sometimes people get confused that like, oh, core, you're not accrediting the network, but what about AFNet and MXIN and stuff? I'm not saying that. You know, MXIN, NMCI, AFNet, Nipper in general, like you should still have your accreditation for that, because we want to protect the data and applications that are in there. What I'm saying is that your transport level now, it, we're in a space where we don't really care about that, and thus we can follow this idea of zero trust architecture, right? So I think that's where I'm getting at. And I hope that answers your question. And this could be a very unique view, maybe based on what everyone's talking about, but I hope that's a good answer to your question.
Will, this is Andy. I might just add a little bit that, I mean, they're relatively early days here, right? There is still some testing and experimentation going on and some red teaming planned. So based on the results of that, we may see some adjustments, but that is, you know, the position that Will is articulating is, you know, what they're looking at in INDOPACOM from what I understand, but still some testing going on.
Yep, absolutely. And come to Will Fong for any assessment questions that we're doing as well. That's a whole nother presentation, as apparently I can actually take up a full hour of this presentation. So thank you. Thank you, Andy, for the clarification. Yeah, and I'll just finish with the thought that it's, you know, we're understanding that we're accepting some type of risk, right? It's just, what is that balance for us depending on what the operation is? We know that risk is never going to be zero. Even with our accredited networks, that risk has never been zero. And ask any network defender that, you know, if they stop doing their jobs for 1 second, you know, some very sophisticated actors might be able to get at our data, which may be less than desirable. I know that's probably some exaggeration, but really with the urgency that we feel out here and some of the priorities that we're seeing, that's how it's becoming, right? So how do we best focus some of our critical assets that we have to protect what's really important on the network? All right, I see there was a question here. How are you addressing insider threats? So I think you're actually seeing a lot of that being detailed in the Zero Trust Architecture document. So if you haven't seen that, please take a look at that. The Zero Trust Architecture document out of NIST, which you can look up, details a lot that we're moving away from the moat castle and moat approach, which honestly, I kind of think that ATOs are to transport networks, is that we're trusting everyone that's on the network, and everyone that has access to that transport network should have access to all of the applications and stuff, right? So in what I just said, I think we're moving away from, hey, if you have access to this network, now you have access to all the applications, which I think is kind of a disadvantage when it comes to insider threats, as you're addressing there. In that document, you'll also see a lot of documentation on, like, roles-based access and least privileged access, right? Does everyone need access to all of the applications and data that's out there on Nipper, right? Should everyone have access? Like, essentially, what we do for, like, need to know, right? Do these people need to know these things to do their job effectively, right? So I think as we start shifting our mindsets to preventing these type of insider threats, and all of the great work that's happened with multi-factor authentication, and things that you have, things that right, and where is the line that we can, of course, accept risk to this, right? So it's, of course, down to the level of, all right, if someone's holding a gun to my head and telling me access this or else, it's going to be hard for me to protect this. But now you're looking at defense in depth. All right, how did the adversary get a gun to my head? And I know this is somewhat of a silly example, but I'm not promising to have like your cure-all or panacea for all of these things. It's going to be a lot of tools that are brought together, a lot of best practices that every single one of us is going to have to practice to be able to implement what's really zero trust, right? So I think, reporting something that looks phishing or fishy, I should say, or, having best practices on your own about, like, hey, I probably don't need to send all this information. Or, maybe even your typical operation security, right? Or, you have a lot of great point by John in the chat here. Sometimes it's employees just trying to get their job done and taking risky shortcuts, right? How do we affect the policy? And I think a lot of us in this room are decision makers. Like, how do we make it such that they're not taking shortcuts? How do we make this an acceptable risk, or how do we make these folks' jobs easier so they don't need to take shortcuts? I think it's kind of a very multi-pronged approach to zero trust architecture, and honestly a full-blown Q&A that we can have, and maybe even something on the whiteboard that we should do, like, all right, if people are being malicious, these are the different things that we have. And it's almost like, should we just play a war game on this and think about the various decisions that people need to make, right, to be able to protect the different networks and otherwise, right? So we can rely on training, right? But, as someone that's been through training a lot, how many of us are actually sitting there for the full several hours when we also have a lot of jobs to do? I might be outing myself here, but I promise I'm taking all of this training to heart. But, for folks that are taking shortcuts, You know, how are we making their jobs easier, right? Or how do we have maybe an assistant, like a virtual assistant that might be able to do that? And is that something that we want to tackle with internal research dollars, right? How do we have an assistant that helps us identify like the ever evolving risk profile that we're doing, right? Can we have someone say that, hey, you know, this person doesn't really need to know this, right? Or, you know, you really shouldn't be sending this to your Gmail such that you can get this to a contractor so they can get you a quote faster so you can meet your execution deadlines because budgets haven't been signed in time and we know there's going to be a big rush to execute, right? So I think there's a conversation we can have at length, but you know, as we're thinking about that, I would think about one thing we can do to even improve our security posture at that time. And you know, even if we're doing one thing every day, one small thing every day to improve our security posture, and we're integrating that into our daily lives, then I think that we as a department, as a warfighting force, can do our part to really make sure that we're maintaining the peace at all levels. Like we like to reference, hey, you know, they're all, and I'll just hit this final slide here. Like a lot of the times we're looking at these maps and seeing physically how are we enabling operations there, but you know, ask any cyber security service provider and you know there's a whole front in the cyber realm too, and what are we doing ourselves as individuals to be able to mitigate that? And I think if we do one thing better every single day, it's going to make a huge difference in their lives. So I know I am reaching the end of my time, and I have actually exceeded it when I thought I would only take 10 minutes here. So I'll leave it for any other questions, or if Andy has got the cane ready.
I think we could take one or two more if we have any. Looks like we may be good in the room. Do we have any others in the chat?
I figured out how to get chat, so.
Okay, if not, I think we are good, Will. I appreciate your time. I know we kept you long and started you early, but thanks very much. A very informative discussion. So thanks again. And a round of applause for Will.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for the time. Really appreciate all the great work that everyone does. You are making a difference out in this theater, and I hope we can keep doing this great work together all through the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. And can I ask you, is Robbie from MITRE in the room? Okay, great. That'll be our next brief on a NATO exercise. Very interesting stuff. I think we do want to take like 5 minutes though, so we can set up for that. So let's take a 5 minute and then we'll be back about 15:25 for that. Thank you.